Saitama. He goes by many different names in pop culture. Bald Cape, Caped Baldy, the One Punch Man. But rarely do you hear him being called hero. A common conversation topic I've heard discussed over the last number of years has been, is Saitama really a hero? With this question in mind, I decided to take to my Twitter to ask my followers their opinions on this controversial character, asking, do you think Saitama is heroic? With over 3,000 votes cast, the results were just as divided as I expected, with the comment section below demonstrating an even more conflicted outlook. Many exclaiming, absolutely not, and others screaming, yes, of course he is. So today I want to take this as an opportunity to analyze and break down the character and personality of one of anime's most popular modern protagonists. A character that's viewed by some as lazy and uninspired, and by others inspirational and complex, all in an effort to determine if he is in fact an heroic figure. Today I want to analyze and break down One Punch Man's main protagonist, Saitama. Before we talk about Saitama's heroism or lack thereof, I think it's important we first define what makes for an heroic act. K.M. Weiland, author of Creating Character Arcs, defines it as, the hero puts himself out there and gives up something major and personal, often his own life, in order to achieve a goal or save someone else. In other words, sacrifice, personal or otherwise, seems to play an important role in defining an heroic act. Typically, this character finds themselves in a number of familiar situations, most depicting the hero with his back against the wall fighting for what he thinks is right regardless of the dangers associated. And seeing as One Punch Man deals with superhero tropes specifically, let's take a look at the film Captain America: The First Avenger. Acting as the prime example of what I think most people might agree on is the definition of an heroic figure in pop culture, Captain America in this film is certainly not short of his fair share of heroic moments. The most obvious being its ending, as Cap makes the difficult decision to crash the plane he's flying to save the world, choosing to end his own life for the greater good, losing everything important to him in the process. However, I think the best example of an heroic moment from the film is this. This is a terrific example of a scene that shows off exactly what many would argue are important attributes in making your hero a hero. Without delay, casting yourself into harm's way in order to preserve the well-being of someone other than yourself. An altruistic act of good. A common argument I've heard is that Saitama, a person that's resilient to the point of being near indestructible, cannot have a scene like this. He can't be brave like Captain America or Spider-Man because, unlike them, he isn't physically threatened by anything, and therefore can't sacrifice his physical well-being for the good of others. And that's absolutely true. But it wasn't always the case. In one of the very few glimpses we get as readers into Saitama's past, we see a powerless, young, disillusioned man apathetic in his struggle to find a job. Confronted by a monster seemingly for the first time in his life, he puts up no fight to protect his own life once threatened. The monster explains that he is after someone else and moves along without harming Saitama. On his journey home, he encounters the child that the crab monster is after. Before long, the crab monster arrives on the scene to confront the child in front of Saitama, ready to kill him. Without thinking, Saitama throws himself in harm's way, saving the child's life. He decides in that moment to pursue his childhood dream of becoming a hero that defeats villains. And he does just that. However, in that pursuit, he loses the ability to be physically vulnerable to attack, which is the most common threat to be issued to a hero by a villain. As a result, if the modern Saitama was put into the same position again, it wouldn't have the same tone or sense of danger and sacrifice, thus losing its air of heroism. And the author of One Punch Man was aware of that, which is why we have characters like Genos that exemplify a more traditional power set and moral compass, dealing with situations for the good of others even in the face of absolute destruction. However, does this mean that because of Saitama's seemingly invulnerable state of being, it's fair to say that, since gaining his powers, he hasn't done anything, nor is he capable of doing anything heroic? No. In Robert McKee's book, Story, he writes, "Story is about archetypes, not stereotypes. The archetypal story unearths a universally human experience, then wraps itself inside a unique, culture-specific expression. A stereotypical story reverses this pattern. It suffers a poverty of both content and form, it confines itself to a narrow, culture-specific experience, and dresses in stale, non-specific generalities." In other words, it's the characters and their arcs that should dictate the scenes that are created, not the other way around. And so, because certain genres produce stories that often often portray certain characters in specific ways. When an author writes their story, they might feel compelled to shoehorn their characters into specific scenes they have in mind, to create scenes or story beats that are more familiar to the viewers or readers. Or put more simply, forcing tropes in unnatural ways. An example of this misuse of character can be observed in the film Suicide Squad, where a group of villains of varying expertise and ability are thrown into a situation they wouldn't naturally choose to be in. However, the issue with this story becomes abundantly clear when characters like Harley Quinn, Killer Croc, and the rest of the team decide to save the day at the end. Not because it makes sense for their characters to come to that conclusion, but because that's what happens at the end of these kinds of films. It's a classic case of stereotypes driving the narrative instead of character.
Come on, let's go.
In the areas Suicide Squad failed, I think One Punch Man seems to have its strengths. For a show that deals with supernatural heroes and monstrous characters on a regular basis, it never loses itself in the stereotypes and pitfalls of the genre, embracing that side only when it makes sense or if a joke is being made. Midways through the first season, a character by the name of the Deep Sea King is introduced as he wreaks havoc on a city, claiming the lives of many and taking out numerous impressive heroes along the way. Right as the last line of defense for the citizens of the city is crushed, Moomin Rider, a regular man trying to do the right thing, having traveled miles by bicycle, arrives to help in whatever way he can. The characters watching in the background and all of us watching from our homes know that he doesn't stand a chance. And in possibly one of the most moving moments of the series, we watch a man humble himself both physically and verbally because he knows that giving everything he has to protect people is the right thing to do. The devastated and frightened crowd turn to roaring support and applause as they cheer for Moomin Rider. Barely standing, he uses the support of the people to psych himself up for one last great attack.
Nice fight.
In this scene, Saitama demonstrates that he is an heroic figure in ways no other character has been before in the story. To help us fully understand how One Punch Man's author 1 achieves this, we must first understand the term dramatic irony. In Robert McKee's book Story, he explains, in dramatic irony, the audience knows more than the characters. Dramatic irony creates interest primarily through concern alone. Eliminating curiosity about facts and consequences, it encourages the audience to look more deeply into the motivations and casual forces at work in the characters' lives. In other words, when we the audience know the outcome of a scene or event, we can more closely pay attention to, understand, and appreciate the motivations and emotional nuances of a scene. For instance, in the movie Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele, upon first viewing, we as a viewer can sense that there is something not quite right about the family Rose has brought her boyfriend Chris to meet. And so we spend quite a bit of time trying to figure out what the movie isn't telling us. Once it's revealed to us what Rose and her family have in store for Chris, the movie quickly and satisfyingly reaches its action and suspense-filled conclusion. However, upon second viewing, as an audience, instead of trying to figure out what the twist or ending might be, we instead can focus on and understand the decisions the characters made along the way to get to the conclusion. A terrific example of what I'm talking about can be observed with Rose's objection to the police officer's request at the beginning of the film to see Chris's identification. Upon first viewing, it might appear as though she is standing up for her boyfriend. However, it is in fact her working to avoid a paper trail being created for the authorities to follow once Chris eventually is brainwashed by her family. If you know how the scene, episode, or film ends before the character does, then that is dramatic irony. This is why we enjoy a film or show more, or at least differently, on a second viewing. Instead of trying to make sense of what's happening, we can instead focus on understanding, empathizing, and dread what the characters are about to experience. In the case of this particular One Punch Man scene, there are two important aspects of the story at play once Saitama kills the Deep Sea King. Before going into the altercation, we as viewers know that Saitama is jealous of Genos' adulation and success with the public. Saitama wants to feel appreciated and actively goes out of his way to seek recognition and appreciation earlier in the story. However, right after Saitama kills the Deep Sea King, the scene skips to the future as both Genos and himself are opening letters they have received in the mail. Amid dozens of fan letters Genos has again received, Saitama is excited to find out that he has one too. At this point, we have been led to believe that this will in fact be a fan letter considering the great service Saitama provided by protecting the large crowd from the Deep Sea King. However, moments later, we find out that it reads, "No one cares about you, you cowardly, cheating bastard." This now acts as the lens for which we view the subsequent flashback of events. We now understand the conclusion, and so we can now focus on the motivations and choices made to get to this point. Once the letter is shown, we return back after the Deep Sea King's defeat as the crowd erupts with cheers of joy for Saitama. As quickly as it began, an individual in the crowd begins rationalizing that if a rank C hero like Saitama was able to do what the S-class and A-class heroes couldn't, then the Hero Association must be a fraud and doesn't deserve the tax money they receive from the public. Overhearing all of this, Saitama, without skipping a beat, begins gloating and thanking all of the heroes for their hard work in softening the villain up for him. He exclaims that now he can continue to take credit for their hard work. Saitama, in this moment, chose to deny himself the appreciation and respect he deeply desires and deserves, in favor of preserving an association that refuses to acknowledge him, but one that the people need to protect them from the creatures that lurk in wait. Heroism is the throwing aside of things that you care about in favor of doing the right thing for others. Sacrifice, as common as it is in superhero stories, usually manifests itself in the hero putting himself into life-threatening danger, struggling against a great evil, achieving heroic feats using their spectacular powers. However, somewhat ironically, Saitama, a hero with power beyond comprehension, manages to become a hero in a way all of us watching have the power to be. There are many other instances in the story where Saitama provides selfless service to those that do not appreciate him and to those that do not ask for his help. But a hero is not limited by what is asked of him, but what he asks of himself. One Punch Man reminds us that sometimes being a hero can be as simple as choosing to say a difficult thing for the right reasons. For a character with abilities as fantastical and overstated as Saitama's, it's ironic to see that his heroism is not only understated, but when compared to the rest of the heroes that inhabit the pages of Shonen Jump and beyond, is both minimized and unconventional. It's made abundantly clear in the source material that Saitama is an everyman, traditionally unintelligent and somewhat lazy. But on the rare occasions that he is faced with issues his powers do not equip him for, he proves time and time again that not only is he a remarkable character, but also an heroic one. Thanks for watching.